In this video, I'm going to diverge a little from my aviation theme channel to work on my amateur model making skills by building an armor piece. Since this tank was designed to shoot down Allied aircraft, I can still cheat and say it's airplane related. In the past, when I regularly built models, I primarily focused on airplane and ship kits. In 2003, I built a Tamiya 135 scale Wirbelwind. It turned out to be the last model I built before taking a 13-year break from building models. So putting this kit together will be a bit of nostalgia for me. I will use that 2003 completed model you saw at the beginning as a basis for comparison with this build. One thing I will do with this new kit is to make the tank a bit more weathered and worn to emphasize and practice these type of modeling techniques. I won't show a lot of clips of the construction of the kit as I'm more concerned about the weathering and detailing of the tank. With an armor piece such as this, you have a lot of duplicate parts to attach, so it seems like a factory production. I was looking at these portions here and I was looking forward to doing a lot of washes and bringing out the detail. Unfortunately, as we put the road wheels on, I'm sure all that's going to disappear, so that'd be almost a waste of time. Here I've begun to work on the front part of the hull, attaching hatches, lighting. This is the cannon mount, and now I'm going to put a very dark coat of flat black onto the model. I really want to emphasize a worn look, so I think this will be a good base coat to apply to the entire outer hull of the model, including the turret. On the lower section, I'm going to put a very dark coat at the top of the side of the hull here where the shadows would be the greatest, and then I kind of feathered out and lightened the coat towards the bottom of the sides here. And I started on the upper part of the turret, which I believe they call the biscuit tin. Next is the lower section of the turret, which will house the gun mount, I also want to emphasize that worn look inside the turret portion here, so I've also applying a layer of black paint within the inner portion of the turret. Now I get the top above the treads. Probably won't be very well viewed from anybody looking at the model, but I want to make sure I get these areas. Now I apply white to highlight areas. I want to get a fading effect here and there once I apply the final colored coat. So these are areas I think that there'd be more fading and more sunlight hitting the surface of the model, or the tank rather. And I do the same for the turret. Back to construction. This is the side of the gun mount where the cannons will be attached to, 2 on this side, 2 on the other, for a total of 4. It's a quad gun mount, and I test the mechanism of the gun mount so I can elevate the guns. This is one of the cannons. If you look head on, you can see it's a solid barrel as it was molded. I put it in a vice grip to steady it up here. I'm going to bore a hole with a mini vice drill bit to give the illusion that it is an actual hollow barrel like a real gun would be. This is my biggest drill bit for models, and it's a little too small, so you can see I'm angling it in as I go in to get that bore hole a larger and more dimensionally correct. This is the first gun barrel, and the hole needs to be just a little wider, but you can see I'm making nice progress. It has a nice effect here. And this is after I completed all 4 of the guns to mount the quad. And this is just a shot showing progress on the lower portion of the gun turret. Now back to factory work. I have all these wheels to paint, so I'm going to put them in this spare packaging to hold them in place while I airbrush them. This technique worked good for the road wheels, but not the idle wheel and the drive wheels because there's so many angles to get at, and it's just too confined to get at the different portions of those larger wheels. Now I begin the main colored base coat on the tank. I'm trying to put a very light coat to let the black and the white show through so I get that faded effect. I also have to consider that I have the green and the brown camouflage to paint on, so that's yet another coat I'm going to have to place on the hull. So I want to try to keep it light also to have those areas faded once those camouflage patterns are placed upon the surface of the model. I usually don't wear gloves when I airbrush, but I know I'm going to have to do a lot of painting here, so I didn't feel like getting paint all over my fingers and fingernails and having to sit around the bathroom sink scrubbing away at my skin and nails. As you can see here, we're getting that variation, and I like the effect I'm getting right now. I get the lighter areas with the yellow, but also dark areas, so it looks very metallic to me. It looks like real armor. At the bottom here, I'm going to also keep it darker actually because I'm sure there's not a lot of paint that hangs on after going around roads and all sorts of debris. And now to the turret, and I'm going to keep consistent by kind of keeping that black and white showing through the yellow coat. Get that real metal armor effect. I didn't shadow coat the gun mount, but I'm planning to do washes to bring out the detail. And here I touch up the bigger wheels that I wasn't able to do a very good job on in that packaging. And this is the look of the main portions after the coat of yellow. Once we get the camouflage on, we'll see how the fading effect holds up. Going back to the gun mount, I'm going to apply an oil wash here to make it more realistic used and bring out the details of the rivets and different panels. And I also cleaned it up a little here. At this point, I'm going to apply a little brown to simulate rust on the gun mount. The guns are mounted now, and now I'm doing paint chipping on the barrels with silver paint. And here's a close-up, looking pretty good here. Nice used look. For the muffler, I'm going to use talcum powder to simulate rust texture on the surface since I don't have any proper modeling textures, and I'm also being cheap here. If it doesn't work, at least it'll smell good. And here's a close-up. We're getting a nice rust effect. On this toolbox, I've applied silver paint to the hinges and the handle, and now I'm going to apply a little paint chipping effect. Looking at pictures of the actual Flakpanzer, there is prominent weld lines on the turret, so I'm applying Tamiya putty here to simulate those kind of weld lines, and then I'll have to repaint these sections. I've masked off the turret, and now I'm ready to apply my first layer of camouflage. We'll start with the brown. My initial intention was to follow the camouflage pattern as shown in the model guide exactly, but I found that it's easier just to do freehand, and as long as you're consistent, it comes out pretty nice and reasonable. And of course we don't want to forget the wheels. Now for the next camo, I go with the green. And again, just drawing random patterns, trying to not bunch up the different colors, but try to keep an even pattern going about the entire surface of the model. One problem with freehanding the camouflage is you might get carried away, which is what I did here on the right side of the turret. I got a little too much green and it didn't look right to me, so I'm retouching it up with the dark yellow, and then I'm going to retouch it up with the green to get a more consistent pattern. It just looked a little too overdone at that point, so I'm going to redo this portion. Even though these springs are probably not going to show up after I put the road wheels on, I want to do some detailing here. So again, I'm using an oil-based wash to bring out the little details here around the bolts and the leaf springs. And I'll clean up here with the Q-tip. And I thought this would be a nice shot looking back at the back panel of the hull initially, and now how it looks after some work. Here's the main hull after all the camouflage has been applied to the overall surface. Now that the overall camouflage is complete, I'm applying an oil-based wash to bring out the crevices and accentuate the panel lines and other prominent features on the surface of the model. And I bring out the Q-tip again to adjust the darkness values of that wash to kind of get that realism we're looking for. I guess it depends on your taste and how dark and how dirty you want to make your model. So it's kind of interesting and a little fun to play around with that kind of technique. And of course you don't want it to spill over too much, so you need to clean it up as best as you can. But that oily look also really is makes that model look much more realistic, to me at least. And here we go around the hatches. Same technique again. Just applying it, let it sit a little for a bit, and then clean it up. And once again, we're back to factory work, so we're going to have to paint black around all these road wheels. It's very tedious. I've got a little putty on the end of a toothpick, or as the British would say, a cocktail stick. And you can see I can rotate it around really quickly. I can't take credit for this idea. Plasma, if you've seen him on YouTube, does something similar to this, and it's actually pretty handy, and you can do this fairly quickly, so cuts down on the tedious nature of this kind of portion of the build. Since I didn't pre-shade the road wheels, I'll have to darken it up with some wash by hand. Just more progress shots. Here's the turret, and here is the turret on the hull with the road wheels and main wheels on. Now I'm going to do a little paint chipping effect, just some rust colored brown and kind of orange and black, and just hitting around the hull and the hatches where I think there'd be areas where we'd lose paint prone to use. And I won't use silver or aluminum colored like I did on the first model, which is kind of a mistake. I work on the turret next, and I try to hit the areas where the welds would be. I would think the paint would have a harder time to hang on to those uneven surfaces, so I try to hit all the edges along those weld lines. First decal I'll put on is the German cross emblem here on the back using a microset and microsol as usual. Next is the number on the turret. The kit gives you the option of doing 031 or 032, and since I did 031 on the first model, I'll do 32 on this one. On the left side, the cross would be partially obscured by the spare wheel, so I've cut the decal a little bit to fit it into place. Next are the treads. To dirty it up a little bit, I'll put this kind of brown and yellow wash to show kind of mud. Here's another shot. I've kind of mixed it again with the talcum powder, and here I'm going to try to splatter towards the bottom of the front hull here to give the impression of mud being splattered as it went through maybe a wet road. Not quite too muddy, but just enough to splatter a little dirt onto the front. Other than the overall color change and a few of my added detailings to the 2016 kit, I didn't think 2016 was too much better than the original 2003 model. And I didn't achieve that worn look I was looking for especially. I haven't done too much armor, so it might be better than I imagine. What do you think?